My name is Jorden Scott. I'm currently based in New York City, and I am the head men's soccer coach at Manhattan College, which is an NCAA Division I institution. I grew up in Scotland in a small town called Mauchline, which is about 8 miles outside of Kilmarnock. And I say Kilmarnock because it's the only football team that maybe people recognise in Scotland outside of Celtic and Rangers. So I grew up about 8 miles outside. It's a very country town. There's about 900 people that live in the town. And, we had a primary school in the town, but to get to the high school, we had to take a bus every day. And the only thing that really mattered in our area was football, or soccer as we call it here in America. And I'll refer to it as football throughout this interview. So football for me was a social gateway to being included or to being accepted. I always say that because without football, being good at football, there really wasn't much else you could do. Even though school was, offered things like arts and crafts or offered music or at very early stages of using a computer, but at the same time, socially, that wasn't something that was on the TV. It wasn't something that the parents were excited about. There was no clubs that you could really be part of. So there was only really one way you could go. So I ended up, my father was a football player, at the semi-professional level, not really high level, but certainly a good level. And he pushed Liverpool on me pretty big when I was younger. The bed sheets, the VHS tapes and the video player. And, I remember one of my earliest childhood memories was, when I was younger, I used to play. My father used to put the VHS tapes in every morning, Saturday morning, we'd put them in. We'd watch Liverpool from the 80s because they weren't very good in the 90s. So we watched them in the 80s and we would sort of mentally prepare for the game that day. And that would be my weekend, and it was great. Me and my father grew close. My mother learned to fall in love with the sport, as I'm sure all parents do. And it was a very blue collar, hard-working, football-based childhood, and there wasn't a tremendous amount of focus on education. After high school, I got to about 16, and I just could not stand, the environment, and I decided to leave with my GCSEs at 16 as opposed to staying an additional 2 years to gain higher level classes in high school. I left. I was offered a contract with a team called Ayr United, who back then Ayr United was in the one division below the Scottish Premier League and were doing pretty well. It was a gentleman called George Burley who went on to coach for Ipswich Town in the Premier League, coach Scotland. He was manager at the time and he really liked me and he brought me in. I was in with the reserve team at 16, and so I decided to go part-time professional, part-time what at that point was what was called an HND, Higher National Diploma in Sports Coaching, at a college called James Watt College in Greenock in Scotland. The first year was in Greenock, the second year was in Largs at the Scottish National Sports Centre. So I sort of traded off being a professional and beginning my coaching, because coaching was something that was closely related to playing, and so I could almost get my head around it. And I also found that over the years, I always had issues with methods in school or environments in coaching, and I was intrigued about what could I do to make that experience better for the next player. And I always evaluated that. I remember even the early days of my life, my father taking me out the back garden, and we didn't have much. We were in a council estate, and we had a small patch of grass at the side, and we used to mark little marks on the side of the wall that my mother never knew about, so I could shoot and practice. And it was all about constantly working at getting better at little things. And I always felt in school it was very group based, and there was no attention to detail. And I felt even in my childhood, I remember my father telling me, imagine there's always a box, and he still says that to this day. So if he ever hears this, his name will go down in history. But he always said, imagine little boxes in the goal and just constantly mentally prepare for that. And those little things were never spoken about back then. It was use your strengths, make good tackles, get the ball up the field, and then go from there. And So I went at 16, I left. I went into sports coaching, did a 2-year program. During my 2 years, I ended up setting up a men's soccer program for the college. It was never there before. I ended up starting my badges, the UEFA badges in Scotland, which at that point at Largs was where the likes of Mourinho, Pochettino began their UEFA badges. And the SFA has a real strong history in coach education. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved every minute of it. But I completed my course at 19, and I had to make a decision. And at 19, I was inspired by, similar to this type of podcast, I was inspired by a gentleman called George Lucas. George Lucas was a sports psychologist who taught at my school, who worked with Celtic Football Club, specifically with certain players. And George really inspired me through his teaching to consider sports psychology. And from there, I applied to universities, and I ended up at University of Glamorgan to begin my bachelor's degree in sports psychology. I would say I was good with balancing both coaching and playing. I was passionate about both up until I got to maybe 22, 23. So I remember I started coaching at 17, which is pretty young. At 17, I'd set up the first sort of club. I was already working part-time jobs at a leisure centre in Scotland where I was coaching basketball, coaching badminton, volleyball. I was already learning the sort of methodology, all the things we talk about: body language, behaviour, approach, how to affect individuals, how to affect a group, how you speak, where you speak, all the little things that you consider on a daily basis. The details, I was already working on them at 17 through my course, but I was also doing it part-time as a job. So I was constantly learning. It was almost like I was getting paid to work on my craft. And I really loved that. Even swimming, we even did curling. I don't know if you've heard of curling in Scotland, where they roll my town was the only place in the world that made curling stones. So we had a leisure centre, we were able to do that. So I started to do a little bit of that as well. And I found great, especially things like volleyball that I'd never played before, gymnastics I could never do because I was so big and clumsy. I was never good at gymnastics, but I tried, and I found that even if you didn't know exactly how to perform it yourself, there was a way that you could impact someone else. And it was about trial and error, positive reinforcement. It was about breaking things down. And even at 17, I just get so much enjoyment, satisfaction, should I say, from helping other kids, even special needs kids in the program we had in one of the leisure centres. There was just this feeling that you were doing right and you were helping someone have a better day or a better moment. And that's really when it caught on at 17, 18, that, this could be something I got a lot of satisfaction in my life from. Try to envision where I'm going to be, how that feels, and then relate it back to my goal setting. And the goal setting obviously leads to your program's aims and objectives. So I follow that path. I have my aims and objectives overall for my program, 6 month, 12 month, 3 years. I always stick to that plan. And then below that, I have my goals, annual goals. And then within those goals, I use my own, evaluation process throughout the year. But more importantly, within training and games, I'm constantly thinking about, what if this happens? What if that happens? And I'm trying to envision it in my head so that I can write notes about how I can react to that moment. And I think that's where I've found success. I know others have done. There's a ton of other methods, as we did in my degree, that you can use. They always used to refer to golf. In my course with golf is a big one, because you're out there for 4 hours or 3.5 hours. You maybe hit the ball for maybe 15 minutes. So what are you thinking about the rest of the time? For the average person like me, we're out thinking about clearing our head, having some fun, maybe, having a beer, driving the car, having a joke and a laugh, and that's fine. But for the professional players, what are they thinking about? What is it in their head that they're considering? Because their emotional state, whether their anxiety levels, their imagery in their head about how this swing is going to go and how it's going to look, they're preparing for hours on this stuff. And I think soccer is so reactional. I get it's higher pace, higher intensity, but there has to be a period of time where a player or a coach sits down and starts to think about, can they see themselves performing this, and how does it feel, and what emotions do we need to control, and all those things have to go into it. I believe pre-game, pre-training. A lot of listening, a lot of asking questions, a lot of research, a lot of late nights, early mornings, recognizing when getting feedback, recognizing when you're wrong or when you've done something that didn't work, and you have to be able to adjust. You know, there's a difference in America and Britain, and I've traveled a lot in my life, fortunately, and I've seen a lot of different cultures. And I think the one thing about Britain is that in different parts of Europe, I guess, but certainly in Scotland and England, I think that, and this is being generic, there is this defensive mechanism that you can never be wrong. And you grow, I guess it traces back to the whole, I'm a male, I should take care of my house, I should put food on the table, I should dominate in my family, because that was the culture when I was growing up, right? In the 60s, 70s, 80s, men went off, even way back before that, into when men went to the army and the women stayed at home, right? And I think that culture has grown across in Britain substantially. And I think that even today, I think if you talk to a player from Britain, can be very defensive, could suffer from anxiety and the belief that what you're telling them is that they're wrong and they're bad, rather than this is another way to do it and it'll make you better. I think in America, the Americans have it down generically, I'm saying, not specifically, generically, to a point where they want feedback. Like, they really want it. And I think it's something that I struggled with on a comfort level early on, was getting that annual feedback or that annual report or that quarterly meeting with your boss, sitting down talking about how you can be better. I do it with my staff now, and I find them to be more accepting of it than I ever was in my life. And I look back and I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had listened more. But again, you're a product of your culture and your environment. So I don't necessarily blame myself, but I wish I had more moments where I could have sat down and asked more questions and been given more feedback. The only feedback we really get in childhood is with your teachers, right? Because if you don't like what your parents are saying, you say, I'm out of here. That's how it works. So I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I'd been more focused. I wish school was more fun for me. I wish I was more inspired at the educational level to do more or to ask more. I think it would have made me, I still think I would have been a coach, but I think it would have made me a better person earlier in terms of responding to feedback. And that would have made me better at what I do. So I think in terms of development, I think the more feedback you get, the better. The more you ask questions, the more you network, the more you connect, the more you can do. But the feedback is not to change you. It's to make you think and add and to edit. It's not to change who you are at your core, which will ultimately change over the years. But it's to give you those thoughts that when you sit in a dark room, or you're sitting on a train, or you're driving in a car and you're thinking about things that go on in life and how you can be better, or the training session that's coming up, or the day ahead, or the week ahead. Like, those things make you better. And the more you do it, the more you'll ask questions. It's infectious. I think years ago, a professor said to me, write down your philosophy, your coaching philosophy in one page. And he said, every year, just sit and write it down, even if it's just a handwritten, kind of scribble that doesn't make sense to anyone else, but you write it down. And I've always found this trend in my philosophies. I won't say the entire thing, but I've always said that the focus is always on someone else. It's never on you. And I think coaches will get so drawn in, for obvious reasons, on maintaining a job, maintaining their own satisfactions, meeting their own ambitions. But I think as a coach, you need to think about what's best for the other person all the time. That has to be your priority, and your success will be a reflection of their success. And I don't believe that I can be successful without them being successful. So if I internally believe that I'm looking out for myself selfishly, then if I'm trying to get to the next level as a coach, I have to prioritize them no matter what. So either you think about them naturally, or you have to understand that they are the most important thing for you to be successful. And over the years, I've recognized that. I think that I always have this debate about, we grow up, right, as kids. I'm sure you the same thing, right? You're in the sport, you want to U9 to U10, you want to get to U10 and be in the A team. You want to be in the best team. Then you want to get to the regional team, then the national team, then the professional level. Then you want to represent your country. Then there's always something else, right? And sadly, it correlates with age. So we always think that when you get older, you've always got to take the next step. That's not always the case. I think that there comes a time when you need to be mature enough to take a step back and go, hold on a second. What am I best at here? Where can I have the best impact? And it doesn't necessarily mean that just because Jurgen Klopp is the head coach of Liverpool, it doesn't mean he's any better a coach than the guy coaching Liverpool U9s. It just means that that's where he's best. His impact, his ability to succeed is at that level. Whereas there's maybe a coach of Liverpool U9s that's truly impacting their academy, and his impact might be even greater than we realise, but it's not on the paper and it's not going to be socially recognised. But that's not why you do this. And I think that that's something I always try and tell younger coaches. If I'm ever, if anyone ever asks me, I always say, find what you're really good at and you're passionate about. Where can you have the most impact on another person's life? And go and do it, because the reward will be huge, both socially, in terms of your mentality, in terms of your psychology, how you approach life in general, and also the success will follow you in your job. I think there's times when you need to be, a father. There's times when you need to be a guardian. There's times when you need to be a boss. There's times when you need to be a coach. There's times when you need to be a friend. You need to be a counselor. There's so many, you have to work on so many levels. And the toughest part is that how do you treat everybody in a unique fashion, but at the same time offer equality within any sort of team format, right? So how does it come across that you're treating players differently, but at the same time you're doing what's best for the team overall? That can be tricky. I think in individual sports, less so. Golf, for an example, could be a great example of how you have to maybe be a little bit more constant in your approach. But I find in my years of coaching in a team environment that it's, getting to know other people, especially your players, being able to approach that on a multi-dimensional level, like so many different angles and so many different days. I mean, I have a great example for you. I was coaching a girls team over here in America who were one of the best teams in the country. And I'll never forget one evening, this may be like 8 years ago, and the captain of the team called me on a Monday night and said, hey Jorden. I always have them call me Jorden. I don't mind them calling me coach, that's fine, but I'm okay with them calling me Jorden. I like that, being on that level psychologically. I think that I have to have both, and so I don't like to just be the coach that everyone's scared of. That I hate that terminology. But anyways, she calls me. She goes, "Hey Jorden, just want to let you know we get several girls in the team this week that are going through their menstrual cycle." And that was like a Monday night, and we were training on the Tuesday. I changed up my approach, like I knew I had to, because I don't necessarily understand it in detail. And I've never experienced it, obviously, but at the same time, you've done enough research. If you do enough research, you'll find that the emotional state can be affected. So then what is your approach? It's support, it's reinforcement at a time when they need it. And so I changed and those things can happen in an instant. So even though I may be going into the session thinking we've got a big game this week, we're going to focus on, they have really strong wingers, so we're going to focus on our back four shape, and 1v1 defending, pressure cover on 2v2s. and balance with a 3. We could think like that, right? But then your approach should be aggressive, loud, demanding, encouraging, celebration, like all those things that can be enthusiastic. But now you're thinking about, right, wow, maybe I have to go in here and change what I'm doing. And it made me better. Those moments made me better. So to answer your question, I think that every player is unique, every situation is unique. I think you have to learn to adapt. And if you don't understand it, you have to do your research, ask questions, and prepare yourself the best you can. And then evaluate after it whether you felt it had an impact without asking them the direct question all the time. We just had a player in my college who just signed a USL contract with New England Revolution and the MLS franchise. And I was talking to a recruit on the phone, and he was congratulating us on him signing. It's a big deal for our program. And I said that the one thing Frankie has above other guys, certain guys in the group that have similar or more, I would say, talent, if you want to invert that talent, is that he had this unwavering determination and commitment to being the best he could be almost every day. So when others were sleeping in, he was up. He was up running. When others were maybe heading into the city to do some tour of New York City, which is great, he was on the field working on his range of passing. When COVID hit, he found a personal trainer so that he could stay on top of his fitness. I honestly believe that there's very few people in this world that are so good at sport that they can get away with just living life as they see fit. I think there has to be a commitment to their career. There has to be a sacrifice to their personal life that will allow them to take that step. And then at that point, it's really, you're hoping the coach likes you and all that good stuff. But I think the difference between being good and being great, in my opinion, is commitment. It's complete and utter commitment. And part of that commitment is sacrifice. I use those two words a lot because I think they go hand in hand. I think in order to be committed to something, you're going to have to sacrifice something else. And you then get to pick what that is. And you have to live with it, sadly. I made a sacrifice to come to America. I sacrificed my family. I sacrificed being away from them all the time. I haven't seen my family in a year and a half, almost 2 years, because I'm here and COVID hit, right? So those are things that you look back and you go, right, I made a commitment to being a better coach. I made a commitment to coming to America, being successful. And so I have to follow through on that. I think that Frankie, the kid that just signed, he had this unwavering commitment that no matter where he wasn't going to let it get in the way. So he gave up on things to get to where he was. And I think that's the key to this is just complete and utter commitment. I've read the books on Michael Phelps. I've read about his swimming on Christmas Day and never took a day off in 3 years. It's insane. You read these stories of so many great people that again, I'm using him as an example. He's very famous, but there's others that maybe never won medals, but I'm sure their commitment was just as good. It's just, I think that people think that talent alone is going to get you there. And at times I believe that the lack of maturity or the support around them hasn't guided them to a point where they understand that it has to be matched with commitment if you want to get to the highest levels of the sport that you're involved in. I tell you, in America, I feel that there's not enough focus on competition. And a lot of people would argue with me on this. I've never been in a coaching environment. I've never been with a team that doesn't want to win. Now, the level at which you want to win doesn't matter, but scoring goals and winning is truly important, because success is one of those habits that if you're good at something, you want to do it more, right? You go in and get your hair cut at your favorite hairdressers. I'm sure you're the same. You look good, you leave. Why? You go back there. Why? Because it was successful, right? You're like, yeah, I want to go back to that guy. If it's awful, you're like, nah, I'm not going to go see that guy again. I know I use that analogy because I'm thinking, if you play football and you go on a weekend, you score a goal or you make a great save or you enjoy the moment and the success within that game, you're going to want to go back and do it more. And that's what's going to allow you to fall in love with the sport. So I personally don't think it's possible for someone to continue to fail all the time and continue to return. I think eventually they burn out and failure. I do think that kids and parents and families seek some sort of positive success, a positive moment that they can cling on to. It might be a grade in history. It could be that you completed a spike in volleyball. It could be that you did a cartwheel in gymnastics. But there has to be something that we grab onto. So I think burnout is based on other factors, like what other sports you're doing. I mean, in America, kids are doing 5 or 6 different sports, right? I mean, I have kids and families that you see driving minivans around, dropping kids off at 3 or 4 sports a night and trying to go to school. And it's insane. I'm surprised the parents are not burnt out now that the kids. I only had 1 sport in my life, and I was fortunate. But I think that kids should experience as many sports as they can at a young age. Hand-eye coordination, balance, all those things that you get, understanding tactically that some sports correlate. I think that's really important. But I do think the burnout phase I don't think it factors in when you get to that teenage years, high school years. I think it really comes down to, are you making the right steps? Are you in the right environment? If you are, you'll see that success. You'll want to do it more, which will ultimately lead to where you end up. I do think there's a lack of competition in this country, in America in particular. I think that coaches hide behind the whole, we want to look good and lose, and we're all about player development. Well, player development's fine. I understand that, but player development should ultimately lead to success. There'll be a lot of failures along the way. I understand that, but there has to be success in the result. So why are we playing the sport? I get it. You can also say on the other side, well, there's a lot to be gained from being part of a team psychologically. I agree with that completely. But I've never been on a coaching course where they teach competition. Never. I don't get it. So why do we then go? We go in, we work on shape, strategies, methodology. We talk about coaching points. We talk about, everyone uses the word craft these days, and I guess it's the hot button word, but everyone uses the word craft. Well, shouldn't you be investing time into something you're going to be successful at? And if you're successful at it, then you want to do it. Like I said, you want to do it more. But we go to these coaching courses or we go to these seminars and no one talks about winning and no one talks about hard work to earn a place in the team. It's donuts and high fives at the end of the game at a young age. And maybe that's to get them to come back. Maybe the donuts is why they just keep coming back. But I would also say at some point there has to be a demand on, there shouldn't be unlimited substitutions. There shouldn't. It just takes away the competition within your group to get in the team either. In NCAA Division I college, we can sub everybody in the first half, and then in the second half, you're allowed 1 re-entry. So effectively, in my roster, I've calculated I can make 22 subs a game. That's insane. And we've tried to change it for years, but obviously there's an inclusion participation piece in this for the institution. So I get it. But at the professional level, at the academy professional level, it should be driven home competition always, every day. And we should be in coaching courses or online or some sort of process where coaches learn to create a competitive environment where it's every moment. I did a course at Clairefontaine a few years back with some really high-level coaches in the French Football Federation, and working with the best of the best in the world in terms of coach development, in terms of the players. And they talk about the psychology of the game and the psychology of your training sessions in detail. And it's so important that you create that. You have to. So the word burnout for me doesn't exist, because if you're good at it, you're coming back. And if you're coming back, it's to win. And if you're there to win, it's because you're driven by competition. And we need that, Alex. It has to happen. I always think potential is an exciting word, but it's also a scary word, because you always start to think about, is he on the right track all the time? Is he on the track to reach his potential? How do we do that? Or is it just natural? It's it's a scary word, because if you always live on the fact that you have potential, then are you really that good? You know, people always say he has potential. Okay, well, what is his potential? No one knows. Like, no one knows what his ceiling is. We might have reached the top of his level. We don't even know, but we're still using the word potential. So I think we have to be. I'm very, very big on that. Don't use that word too much. Like, understand the talent in the moment and what he's good at, and then help him foster it. And if there's more to come, there's more to come. Of course, we look at players and we go, there's more physical growth, there's more mental growth in terms of maturity and understanding the discipline and the commitment needed to be in that guy. And but I always struggle when it just comes down to talent in terms of technique, technical talent, tactical talent. I think that that's a scary world to get into, because you're always by saying potential, it's like we're almost waiting for for it to happen. Think at the youth level, of course, the physical, psychological things at the younger ages, you can see, he has potential, he might get to that point. That's fine. But there's so many factors. I mean, you know, there's things that we can't control, Alex. I say a lot of stories, but I think one of the big, I'll give you one on this that really hits home is, I had a really good boys team when I first came to America. They were winning state, regionals, nationals. They were a team that I inherited from a close friend of mine, Kieran Patrick. And one of the kids in the team, his mother and father were going through some issues at home. There was a lot of things going on and what happened was, he used to be driven when he was in the car with his mother being brought to practice. He was fine. When he got to the field, he was good. When he came with his father, he got on the field. He was depressed, upset, angry, and he was really bad within the session. And it took me a long time, and eventually the parents called me and said, "Hey, listen, can we talk?" We sat down, we spoke. And I always remember that moment thinking, I reflect on it a little bit, thinking that there's a lot of people going through that. That's quite common in today's world. We have a lot of things going on socially, a lot of things at home, a lot of people losing their jobs right now, people without money, people scared of COVID and pandemic. I can only imagine the impact that this year has had on athletes. Not just from listen, we can go out on a field and play football all day long, but are you going home? Are you really thinking about it? Are you analysing it? Are you taking the time? Do you feel comfortable? Are you arriving at practice with the right mindset? All those things have had an impact. We know that. And so when we talk about talent and potential, I always worry that we can't control so much of their environment. That are we really the people to be saying they have potential? Because effectively we're going to look back in 3 years and go, he failed, but he failed because there were things that were out with his control. Maybe there was things that we couldn't impact as a coach. So suddenly now we're saying we're a failure, or he's a failure, he never got there. But I always prefer to say, look, every player has the capacity to get better, and if they continue to improve, hopefully they'll get to a level where they feel in life that they achieved everything they could have done. If that makes sense. I always get tremendous pride from watching, and I know this might sound a little corny, but just watching others get better, I think, is my biggest thing. I don't really care too much about coaching awards or success games where we've won, being taking we took a program from 204 out of 204 programs, the NCAA ranking 10 years ago, to being in the top 30 2 years ago. And it's been a lot of involvement, not just me, obviously I've led the charge, but we've had others that jumped on board over the years. But I get phone calls from players I've coached who are doing great things all the time. It could be that one of my players gets engaged or he's getting married, right? There's a satisfaction that a good person has passed through the program and he's happy and he's enjoying life. I had a young man 4 weeks ago from England who came here 6 years ago, came into my program, did his degree, played well, played for Liverpool and Stoke City at a young level. So he clearly was high level kid, but he's decided to stay and do his MBA. He understood his long term was not going to be in soccer. He completed his MBA. He was a wonderful support to our team, even during his MBA program at the school. he just got an entry-level job with Barclays, and he's moved back to England, and he's going to London next week to begin the next stage in his life. There's just so many stories like that. Frankie, obviously, again, he's a recent one with a pro, but there's so many stories of guys over the years, even at the youth levels, where kids have done well and went on to the next level, or kids have gained scholarships, or they've won awards, and all those moments sort of validate why you do something. They really do. I mean, it makes it worthwhile, because then you think, right, what's the next kid going to need? What's the next player going to need? What's the next person going to need? And all those things are the reasons why we do it. As I said at the very beginning, it's not about me, although my success will probably kick in as they become successful in life. So I do get a lot of satisfaction from other people. Of course, the wins and big days, I get, you enjoy it, but then you wake up the next morning and you start to analyze the next game. So you don't really, that doesn't get me too far, which I would say is probably the one thing in my life I find it most difficult and depressing, is I can never enjoy something for too long. And too many people have told me that. I'm always on to the next thing. So, I think watching other people be successful is probably the biggest thing for me. There's a few people over the years. My father, obviously, huge inspiration for me. The lengths him and my mother went to provide me with the opportunity, I think, is the reason why I'm so determined. Like I said at the beginning, very blue collar. My mum works in a supermarket. My father was a bricklayer. My sister never went to college. I was the first in my generation to go to college. I was the first in my family to get a degree. Now I'm doing just about completing a master's in leadership. Even at 40 years old, I'm looking at ways to get better. I think my parents will always be that inspiration, because whenever I have a tough day or a rough moment, I consider what they had to give up for me to be here, and the financial sacrifices that they gave up, the commitment they made to me and my future was above what they needed. And that's probably what made me who I am today, is that they did something for me they would never have done for themselves. I mean, I can't even get my dad to buy a pair of jeans. He just wants to give me something else, right? It's frustrating, even at this age, it's frustrating as all hell. But your parents are I was very fortunate that I grew up in a very solid family, great support. And not a lot of money, but that was okay, because what they gave me was worth more than money. And I think that they are everyday inspiration for me. From a coaching perspective, I don't think I have too many coaches that I think I look up to in terms of the sport, although I admire every one of them. I would say that I've met several people over my time. Ashley Hammond, who I worked for when I first came to America. Tim Doran, became a recent friend of mine in the last 4 or 5 years, who are in other businesses, in other industries. And these guys have this work ethic that I admire, and they are older than me. And I look at their age and I think, if they can work that hard for something that they want and they're inspired to go get, then that should be a reflection of who we all are. And so I guess that feeds back into the fundamentals of life: hard work, timekeeping, communication. Like Ashley and Tim in particular, for me, resonate the type of person I want to be when I get to their age, in terms of their commitment to their families, in terms of their commitment to their work, their career. Those things that you sort of take for granted. Skill, talent. There'll be another Mourinho, there'll be another Klopp, there'll be another Guardiola. There'll always be another guy with a great idea tactically. The game will evolve. They'll always be remembered for moving the game along, but there'll always be another guy. There'll be another mate. And I'm all right with that. But I do think that there's certain people in your life that have these traits that you just look at and you admire so much. And Ashley, Tim, and my parents, certainly those 4 people in particular, have had a lifetime effect on me. I'll tell you what I hope for that changes is I hope that it becomes, which is a huge hope, but I hope it becomes less diluted. I hope that the sport, American soccer, becomes more triangle in nature, in terms of recreation, becoming more travel and inclusion, becoming more select teams, becoming more academy focused, and then leading through. And I hope that the MLS and US soccer can get on some sort of level where there is a clear pathway for the kid that's being born tomorrow, right? And I think that we've lost that. It became such a big business over here that everybody's selling the next academy, and everyone's selling the next great coach, and everyone's selling the next great facility. And I think that we've diluted the market. I think that the people that had these programs 20 years ago that are hanging on for dear life because it's now part of their revenue stream and they need it to survive are hanging on. And I just think that there's no clear pathway to get to the level that we need. And you see all these American players now coming overseas, as you probably see in Europe, a lot of emergence of American players, and they're leaving at an early age because we're failing over here in terms of elitism. I would hope over the next 10 years that college soccer becomes more year-round. I'd love to see a year-round model in college soccer, especially at NCAA Division I level, where there's more focus on player development, where there's more consideration for player health and safety, and we're able to continue to develop players who choose to go to college. Because if you're an elite player in this country and you get to 18, 19, how likely is it you're going to get a contract, right? It's tough at 18, 19 to get a contract. Managers these days are held on 6 or 7 games and they're fired if they don't win, right? So why are they going to take a chance on an 18, 19-year-old? So to gain that contract is even tougher now than it was years ago, and in my opinion. And in America, it's even tougher because you now have this European influence into the MLS and the USL. So I think that the MLS draft is aimed around college players. But if you think about the college game, we play 20 games in the fall, we play 5 games in the spring, and that's it. We don't play in the winter, so there's another 8 weeks where, for most players, they don't have much to do. And then in the summer, they play in a USL team that's about 15 games if you win, I believe. It's like a summer league. So you've got 20 games of 2 games a week for almost 12 weeks, 12, 13 weeks, even more if you go on to the final. It can be even more than that. Players are burnt out, exhausted, injuries occur, they can't recover from them. If they do, they're thrown back in when they're not ready. And then you get to the spring and you only play 5 games and players are sitting around thinking, what are we doing here? So I wish that we can take the step, and I hope that for the sport that we can move it forward. But again, remember that the sport is within academia. It's within the institution. And so the focus of the institution is not necessarily on year-round sports. There's a financial investment needed. I do think I think those two things, creating a triangle, are creating a clear pathway for the youngest generation to come through and allow us to create this and allow MLS and US soccer to get on the same page with player development. And I also hope that college NCAA can get on board with that and create this 4-year environment where you have players that can come into college, gain a degree, and still continue to get better. Because some of the coaching and the environments in this country are unbelievable. And if we can and we're taking players from Europe that clubs are dumping 18, 19 because they're in the same way, right? We find this every year. And we're trying to provide them with a 4-year window to really develop, get bigger, strong, whatever it is that a club has an issue with at 18, 19. We'd like to provide that for them, and then hopefully they go on. In the current state, it's really tough for a player to come through college and truly develop. There's very few players that do. There will be some, but it's really tough. Become a lawyer and make more money. No, I would never have done that. Oh, wow. That's a good question. I would probably say the one thing I could have done, and I still regret to this day, I wish I went back and done it. I began working with. One regret I have is not fully completing every coaching course I could have done. I've been on several, but when I came to America, I was on a UEFA path, as I said, with SFA. I did my UEFA B, and then it expired. And because of the travel and the costs associated with it, I've never really went back. I think my one thing I'd tell my 17-year-old me would have been, stay involved in coach education for as long as you can. It allows you to generate new ideas. It inspires you to network. It allows you to be more connected to like-minded people. I don't think that, and it's not for they give you a book and a certificate. Fantastic, right? Everybody loves that stuff, and I know some people need it for the job, but I don't necessarily need it in my job. At the NCAA college level, the only thing you need to meet the minimum requirements is a bachelor's degree for most places. It's not about your coaching badges, so I don't need it. But I wish I could go back in and begin that all over again. Maybe I will when my master's is done. But I really do miss the networking within the coaching world. I think that in my job, I'm so isolated because the next person above me is an athletic director who you don't necessarily know that they understand your sport. They have 20 other sports to deal with. You don't really have someone above you leading you, so you're always seeking feedback, and you're seeking your guidance and advice. And I get it from older college coaches. And I started this leadership master's course at my school online, which is has been tremendous for me over the past 6 months that I started it. But I'm seeking more information, and I think that I got to a point where I'm in a position where, other than telling me the processes and the procedures, I really don't have that constant feedback. And so I think as a 17-year-old, I think I should have tried to find financial ways to stay involved in the coach education format back in Europe. And I think I really need to make a concerted effort to go back in and try again. Not try again, but just get back involved again, so that I can stay connected with the sport and gain the guidance that I need to become better at what I do. I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I would say honestly, it's probably my lifetime regret, but it was the sacrifice I had to make for the career I had, is that I gave up. I wish I had made more effort to travel back and forward. I think it's happened more in the pandemic. I've realized that I need to spend more time with my parents, with my sister, with my 2 nephews, who one of them got my name as a middle name, so that's the worst decision she's ever made. But in general, I think, I wish it's kind of my one biggest regret in life has been that I've had to give up so much of my family time to have the life I have, but it's what they wanted for me. So I don't think that they look at it in a negative light. It's just the one thing I had to give up, and that's tough, because if there's one thing you never want to have to give up, it's your family, right? But what I do and where I'm at, I have to be, it was my life path and my passion, and you have to seek that out. And for every coach out there, or whoever is passionate about whatever you do, there's going to be some real big decisions going to be made in your life, and people are going to have to suffer. Even if they don't know it, they're going to have to suffer. And my mother cries every time I go to the airport. So so I've stopped her coming to the airport so that I get on the plane. But those are the sacrifices you make, and it can be tough. And so that's I guess that's my second big regret, would be just that I had to give up time with my family. I wish I had spent more time traveling back and forward. And I'm going to make that change. I made that promise to myself during the pandemic, so I'm going to make that change. So I can't get back all the years, but I'll certainly make an effort to make up in the next however many years we are together. To see into the future, I think. Oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble for this, because I know a lot of people in this. I would say cricket. Cricket, I have friends that play it. They're going to kill me for this one. Cricket, unless you're playing it, it is horrendous to watch. I'll throw the caveat on, Alex, but the 2020 structure is a lot more fun rather than the 5 or 7 day or whatever they call it, where the Barmy Army are drinking on the sidelines for a week. I can't stand that sport. Happily retired. Does that work? Happily retired would be nice. Oh God, my mother wanted to call me Stephen apparently, so I guess I should go with that. My father wanted Jorden because it was after a football player, a famous player called Jorden in Scotland, and then they compromised and it was Jordan with an E. So I'll say Stephen because my mother wanted that originally, I think. Go with hot. I would walk 500 miles by the Proclaimers in Scotland. Oh boy. I did like Seven, the movie with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. I loved that movie. Dogs, 100% of the time. No way, cats. No way. Boy, maybe a chameleon, because I seem to blend into whatever I get thrown into. I seem to float between things and just blend into whatever I'm given a responsibility on. Some of those questions really made me think, and if anything else, it made me think about, we spoke earlier on about feedback and guidance, but these questions in itself make you think about what you do on a daily basis, right? And I said to you, I'm always taking notes and writing things down, and maybe old age, maybe tactical strategy, but I'll certainly be taking my notes on this interview and writing down what I can do most. If there's any coaches out there that would ever need any guidance or advice, I'm not saying I'm the model coach at all. I'm just saying I'm a resource for people and anyone around the world who wants to connect with me, who'd love to get in touch. Obviously, I'm sure we'll connect on LinkedIn with this interview. So if anybody wants to reach out, you can certainly do that. I'd love to hear from them. I was talking to a 17-year-old coach from Scotland last week, trying to give him guidance and advice on decisions he has to make, and even just to talk coaching and technique in any sport, even in industry and business. I'm happy to do that, and thank you again for allowing me to come on.